Well, this has been an interesting year weather-wise, hasn't it? We had a fairly mild winter, and that gave way to sort of a stuck-in-the-middle kind of spring where the temperatures were kind of cool. But we had that bit of a freeze several days ago, and what did that mean? Well, we figured we'd check in with Mark Longstroth. He checks on these things and follows these things closely, a fruit specialist with the Michigan State University Extension. And Mark joins us this morning. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Richard. How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good.
Well, let's talk about what kind of a year this has been, starting in January with the mild winter. When you see those kinds of conditions, do you immediately have any concerns?
No, I don't really immediately have any concerns. It was an unusual winter in that, the coldest part of the winter was in December.
Yeah, right.
And January, we had a thaw, and January was, a warmer than normal January, but nothing unusual. But February was really warm, and, a lot of people began to wonder because it was like March in February, and then March turned around and it was cold and chilly, more like February.
Mm-hmm.
Then, but there was an awful lot of people that were concerned that we might start growing real early, like we did in 2012 because of the warm February.
Did that happen?
No, not really. The cool March held us back. To the south of us, it really got going. There were places, most of the deep south and call it the Ohio River Valley, we're about 3 weeks ahead of normal, and then we had a freeze on March 14th, and we had just started. Everything was going, and we knew that we were a little early, but about 3 weeks early for us too. But that freeze was devastating in the southeast. It's a pretty bad freeze when they give it a name. And down in Georgia and the Carolinas, they call it the St. Patrick's Day freeze.
Oh boy, yeah.
And so
significant enough to give it a name, then it must be worrisome.
Yeah. And so they lost their peach crop and their blueberry crop.
Wow.
Not all of it, but most of it. And so that was a significant thing for us, and that didn't cause us any damage, or we didn't think so at the time. It's obvious now that it caused us a little bit of damage, but only enough that you notice it in hindsight. But we got going. And we had a fairly normal year. We were about 2 weeks early, and we were moving along. And we really hadn't had any freezes until this last Monday, May 8th, and that followed that 2 weeks of pretty cold. We had a really warm week, and we had temperatures much like yesterday, up into the 80s. The week before that, and that night, we had cold, windy air come in from Canada, from the northeast and the north, and the dew point was really low. It was about 20, and we had what we call a radiation freeze. And a radiation freeze is when we have clear sky, and the heat just radiates away from the ground into that open sky. If it had clouds, those clouds would have caught that heat and reflected it back down to the ground, but it was very dry air. The dew point was about 20, and it fell very quickly, and it got down to about 28. Well, it got right around freezing, and many areas it went colder. Many areas went to 28, 26 degrees, and at that point in time, we'd had peaches had bloomed, sweet cherries had bloomed, tart cherries had bloomed, and here in southwest Michigan, apples were blooming, and the blueberries had just begun to bloom. And generally, I tell people when they say, just as they started to grow, everybody was worried that it would go below freezing and hurt them. But just when they start growing, most crops can take temperatures down to 10 degrees without much worry. But by the time you can see the buds coming, 20 degrees will usually hurt them. And when they're blooming, temperatures below freezing will hurt them.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about whether or not that really hurt. And, of course, what folks really want to know when it comes down to it, does that mean we'll pay more for peaches and cherries and things later? And we'll talk about that with Mark Longstroth coming up in just a moment from the MSU Extension on 95.3 WBCK. We're chatting today, this half hour, with Mark Longstroth, the fruit specialist at the Michigan State University Extension. So, as you said, Mark, before the break, we had some growth that we could see on peaches and cherries. In fact, we
were past bloom.
Yeah,
we had gone past bloom, and the petals had fallen off, and the fruit was, we say it was in the shuck, which means the bottom half of the flower was still wrapped around the little tiny peach and cherry.
Mm-hmm.
And we got down to I got up and checked the temperatures throughout the region, and there were some places in the high spots close to Lake Michigan that didn't go below freezing, but many of the others went right to around 28 degrees.
Yeah.
And a few of the cold spots went down to 25. And I tell people when they ask, what are the temperatures you have to worry about? And I say, well, 28 degrees will kill 10%, and 25 degrees will kill 90% of the flowers.
Wow.
So we expected to see widespread light damage when we went out and looked. And we were out looking, and you don't hurry out there. It's like you put a head of lettuce in the freezer, and when you pull it out, it looks fine.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a head of lettuce. It's when it thaws out. So had to wait for it to thaw out. And as we went around, it was the sweet cherries, and you would go to places and you would walk in, and a lot of the stuff they hurt, and you could tell because instead of being green, the inside of the flower would turn brown, or the cherry would turn brown, or with the grapes, the shoots were about as long as your fingers, and temperatures right below freezing will kill them, and so they would be dried up and starting to wilt and just had a different color. They didn't look green anymore. And so we'd walk into some places and everything would be hurt, and you'd walk into other places and nothing would be hurt. And you'd look around and you go, wow. And so these radiation freezes are the ones that are the easiest to protect against, because all you have to do is try to pump heat back into the system. And so the strawberry guys, they run sprinklers at night, and they make and they start them before it freezes, and they make ice, and as long as they keep the ice wet, the ice stays right at 32 degrees, which is 4 degrees higher than 28, and they don't suffer any damage. And many blueberry growers can do that too, and so they did that. Some people have these big wind machines. It's a big 30-foot in diameter fan on the top of a tower, and it will mix warm air that's up above the cold air that's down below if they have what they call an inversion, where you have warm air close to the surface because it's so cold at the ground. We had a weak inversion here in southwest Michigan, and so that didn't work too well for us. But as time went on, other people would go out and look, and they would find damage where they thought they hadn't seen any damage. So the hardest hurt crop were the juice grapes. And so in some of the juice grape vineyards, all the shoots were killed, and in other juice grape vineyards, hardly any of them were killed.
So it really was scattered then.
Yeah, it's like widespread damage, very variable. And so many of the apple growers thought they came through okay, and then as they went back the next couple of days, they'd noticed that the flowers in the bottoms of the trees were dead, but not the tops. The cherries and the peaches, generally inside that little papery shuck, that was enough protection to keep them from being hurt. So there's some places where peaches were hurt really badly, but other places they're going to have it. We expect a normal crop of peaches. And tart cherries down here, we expect a normal crop of tart cherries. The sweet cherries, if the damage was worse away from the lake, the farther you went from the lake, the worse the damage was, the closer you got to the lake. Blueberries, when you went into the fields that had been protected with overhead sprinklers, they look fine. Not everybody has enough water to run all their system, or not everybody has the overhead system. So you go into those fields, and they just look burnt. And as we go back and look at them now, we see that, well, only 10% of the flowers were open at that time, and those are the flowers that were and only about half of them are dead. So it's like 5% damage to maybe half the blueberry fields in the state. So I tell people, oh, we're still going to do 120 million pounds. You know, that freeze is just a bad day of pollination.
Well, that's interesting. And so when we come back in a minute, we'll talk about that, because it sounds like then we'll do fairly decently when we go to try and take advantage of the harvest, that we won't be paying more. But we'll find out for sure. Mark Longstroth is a fruit specialist at MSU Extension, and we'll talk more in a moment on 95.3 WBCK. We're here with Mark Longstroth for a couple of more minutes, fruit specialist at the MSU Extension. So it sounds like then, Mark, the yield will be fairly average if your estimations are right.
Well, yeah, I think that juice grapes will be down. You know, this freeze affected the whole state, so there's Grand Rapids is worried about their apples, and Traverse City doesn't seem to have been hurt, but there are still people up there that say they were hurt badly. So it doesn't look like we were wiped out like we were in 2012. There are some growers who, you know, were hit very, very hard, and so they'll be trying to figure out how much insurance they'll get, calling their insurance agents and trying to do what they can. But I expect that some crops will be below average and others will be average.
So does that translate to us paying more?
In general, no. You know, it's a big national fruit market. I mean, if we don't have any peaches, then it's a big hole in the late peach season, because Michigan produces late season fruit, because we're at the end of the growing season. A lot of people don't think about it like I do every day, that Michigan's got this window in time, which is, you know, July to October, when they produce fruit.
Yeah.
If somebody produces fruit at a different time, the fact that Georgia lost their blueberries isn't going to help our fresh blueberry price any, because we don't compete with them in fresh blueberries. They would be picking right now, and
I see.
So the price of fresh blueberries is high right now. So we'll see it. Michigan's a pretty big player on the East Coast. They're third in the nation in apple production. They're fourth in the nation in grape production. We're number one in cherries. We used to be number one in blueberries, but the Pacific Northwest has planted a lot, and Georgia's planted a lot. So we're where we are in apples. We're in that group that keeps buying for second and third.
Are there any emerging areas that Michigan is trying to become a better player in?
I think we're number 4 in hop production, hops for beer.
Okay.
And the wine grapes keep moving along slowly but steadily. Wine grapes don't like real cold winters. There are some new varieties that can handle, you know, being grown in Mount Pleasant or someplace in the center of the state, but most of them have to be grown in the same places where we would grow. And I tell people, if they want to grow wine grapes, they should go find a place that grows peaches or sweet cherries year in and year out. And that's the fruit site you want. It doesn't get very cold in the winter in comparison with other places, and it's less likely to get a freeze. Those are places on the tops or sides of hills. The closer to Lake Michigan, the better. But I expect that apples will be down, but we normally produce between 20 and 25 million bushels of apples. Blueberries will be, I think, average, because we're recovering from 2 really cold winters in 2014 and 2015 that caused a lot of winter injury in peaches, blueberries, and grapes. And so they're still on the rebound, but I expect we'll do 100 million pounds. Peaches, I don't have off the top of my head, but I think we'll have a pretty good year in peaches.
All right. Well, it overall sounds like decent news for us, and it could have been worse. And so we'll take it. Thank you, Mark. Mark Longstroth, fruit specialist with the Michigan State University Extension on 95.3 WBCK.